She stood at the altar, her hands trembling under a veil of ivory lace. The church was quiet, eerily quiet. All eyes were on her, on them, on what they thought was a love story. But when the priest spoke the final words, "You may now kiss the bride," his lips brushed hers like betrayal, not love. And in that moment, her world shattered. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," echoed through the pews like a death sentence, and as the applause roared to life, she saw him, her son, standing at the back of the church, pale, frozen, and clutching something in his hand. A photo. A photo of the woman she just married, with his arms wrapped around her. Yes, she had just married her son's girlfriend. Welcome to Karma Strikes, where betrayal meets justice. Trong video home ne, banse chung kien mot trong hung kao shuyen treong goen hat ma chung toi tong ki, mot ngoi me, vi long tin, vi tin kam, vi mot sailam kong aingo, ja kwoi chin hngoi yeu kwa kon trai min, kong fai vi ba ko amu, kong fai vi ba matri, ma boy tat ka ja juok len ka huach, tu truok. It began like any modern romance, an online dating match, casual conversations, a few laughs. The woman, let's call her Helen, 52, widowed, living in a quiet suburb outside of Denver, had decided to try love again after years of solitude. The girl she met online was sweet, attentive, and said all the right things. Her name? Emily. She claimed to be 29, a freelance writer from Oregon, beautiful, polite, curious about older love. They exchanged letters, voice messages, video calls, with camera issues, always on Emily's side. Helen thought she had found hope again, a soulmate. When Emily proposed a small symbolic wedding, just us, a spiritual union before we meet in person, Helen, floating in affection, agreed. There was a minister, a rented chapel, a white dress, and a trembling heart. But when she lifted the veil, it was too late. Because beneath that veil was not a stranger. It was Emily, her son's secret girlfriend of 2 years. The same Emily who had been at their Thanksgiving dinner, introduced as Mike's classmate. The same Emily her son had cried over just weeks earlier, claiming she had ghosted him. Now, Helen realized, she hadn't disappeared. She had reappeared, in her wedding gown. If you think this story ends here, think again. What follows is a tangled web of secrets, a digital manipulation plot, and a revenge scheme nobody saw coming. So buckle up, because sometimes the heart doesn't just break, it betrays. And sometimes karma isn't patient. It's precise. It strikes at the altar. Helen Morrison, 52, was a retired librarian living in a quiet suburb of Littleton, Colorado. Her husband David died in a car accident when their son Mike was just 16 years old. Since then, Helen poured all her love into her only child, from PTA meetings to sleepless nights editing Mike's college essays. She hadn't loved anyone else since David passed. "Love for me died with him," she once told her best friend Susan. Mike, now 24, was pursuing a graduate degree in communications at the University of Denver. He was the kind of son any mother would be proud of, smart, reserved, and grounded. But something changed after last Thanksgiving. Mike began staying up late, dodging conversations, and acting like he was hiding something too painful to say. Helen suspected he might be in love, and she was right. That Thanksgiving, Mike had brought home a girl named Emily, introduced simply as a classmate from Oregon. Emily had a gentle smile, a soft voice, and a handshake firm enough to put Helen at ease. They shared a holiday meal, talked about literature, and Emily seemed genuinely interested in Helen's life. "Your mom is amazing," Helen overheard Emily whisper to Mike while they cleaned up the kitchen. After that dinner, Emily vanished. Mike became withdrawn, even breaking down in tears one night in his room. Helen asked what happened, but Mike brushed her off. "She ghosted me," he said quietly. "Just forget it, Mom." And Helen did try to forget. Until 6 months later, someone named Emily Rose 29 messaged her on a book forum. It started innocently, comments about Jane Austen novels, then grew more personal. "You seem like someone who still believes in love," Emily had written. Over the next 6 weeks, Helen and Emily exchanged emails and texts daily. Helen had no idea it was the same Emily. The woman used a vintage painting as her profile photo and explained her refusal to do video calls by saying, "Cameras make me anxious." As time passed, Helen felt alive again. She redecorated her living room, dyed her hair chestnut brown, and even began writing handwritten letters. In one email, Emily wrote, "I wish we could just skip all the talking and be together, even just in spirit." Then came the proposal, a symbolic ceremony, no legal binding, just a way to affirm their feelings. Emily said it would help her heal. No guests, no cameras, just a minister and us. Would that be too crazy? Helen hesitated, but loneliness won. They chose a small chapel outside Golden, Colorado, which Emily claimed was booked through a friend. Helen bought a simple ivory dress and asked Susan to drive her there. Emily arrived late, her face hidden under a veil. The ceremony began. Helen's hands trembled as she held the woman's beneath the fabric. Something felt strange, but her heart was full. Everything played out like a dream until the moment the veil was lifted. In that instant, memories flooded in. A familiar smile, the same eyes that had once sat across the Thanksgiving table, and then a shout from the chapel door. "Mom! What the hell are you doing?" It was Mike. In his hand was a photo, him and Emily on a trip to Seattle. Emily turned to Helen, lips curling into a faint, unapologetic smile. Not an ounce of shock on her face. That's when Helen realized this wasn't an accident. This was a plan. Helen couldn't breathe. The image of Mike standing at the chapel door, horror stretched across his face, clung to her like a second skin. Her son, her only child, had just watched her marry the very woman who had shattered his heart. The woman who had played both of them like characters in a script she wrote. Emily didn't flinch. Her expression remained composed, her fingers gently brushing the edge of the veil as if nothing had happened. "You didn't tell her, Mike?" she said smoothly, stepping forward, her voice coated in venomous calm. "I thought honesty was a thing in your family." Helen turned to Mike. "What is she talking about?" she whispered, her throat dry and burning. Mike held up the photo, him and Emily on the rooftop of a hotel in Seattle, arms around each other, laughing, kissing. "That's Emily, my girlfriend. For 2 years," he said, each word cracking like thunder. I didn't know." Helen's knees buckled, and Susan rushed to catch her. "I swear, Mike, I didn't know it was her." And it was true. Helen had never seen Emily without makeup, without filters, without shadows. Online, the Emily she spoke with was polished, poetic, mysterious. But now, under fluorescent chapel lights, the faces aligned. Too late. "I never disappeared, Mike," Emily said, her voice now sharp and unapologetic. "You ghosted me. After you read my messages to your mom, after you figured out I was trying to connect with someone who actually listens." Helen's eyes darted back and forth between them. "What is she talking about?" she asked again, now trembling. Mike didn't answer. He looked ashamed, cornered. Later that night, Helen would log into her email and find something that would twist the knife even deeper. A forwarded message, sent by Emily 2 months ago to Helen's inbox, but it had been marked as spam. It read, "Before we go further, you should know. I used to know your son. We didn't end well, but I think you're someone worth knowing. Please don't hate me." Helen stared at the date. It had been there the whole time. She never saw it. How do you grieve a betrayal you unknowingly walked into? Over the next few days, Helen tried to talk to Mike. He avoided her. She left dinners untouched on the table, called his phone, texted, nothing. When she finally cornered him at the library one rainy afternoon, he exploded. "You ruined everything. You married her. Do you even understand what that means?" "I didn't know," she repeated, tears welling. "She lied to me, too." "Yeah? But she didn't kiss me at the altar," he snapped, walking away. Helen collapsed into a chair and cried until the library lights dimmed. But as the silence settled, something else rose inside her. Suspicion. Why had Emily targeted her? Why not just move on? Why reappear under a different identity and push for a symbolic wedding? And more importantly, what did she stand to gain? 2 nights later, Helen found herself staring at the wedding certificate Emily had insisted they sign just for fun. Something felt off. The document had a notary stamp, a witness signature, and a hidden clause. It wasn't symbolic at all. Emily had tricked her into a legally binding marriage. Helen's hands trembled as she typed a desperate email to a local lawyer. "Hi. I think I may have unknowingly entered a real marriage under false pretenses. Please help." The next morning, she received a reply from Kelly Thompson of Thompson and Associates, Chicago. "Please come to our office immediately. Bring all documents. We may be dealing with identity fraud, and possibly more." Helen's heart pounded. Whatever Emily's game was, it wasn't about love. It was about something far more dangerous. If you were in this situation, what would you do? Comment below. Would you trust your son again? Would you chase the truth, even if it breaks your family apart? Helen didn't sleep that night. The words from the lawyer's email echoed in her mind. Identity fraud. Possibly more. Her hands trembled as she packed the wedding certificate, the text messages, and screenshots of emails into a manila folder. She booked the first flight to Chicago, where Kelly Thompson's firm was located, desperate for answers. Thompson and Associates sat in a high-rise downtown, the kind of office with cold glass walls and hushed conversations. Kelly Thompson herself, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, wasted no time. "You were tricked into signing a legal marriage certificate," Kelly said, scanning the documents. "And from what I can tell, your bride, Emily, used a fake identity, manipulated consent, and may have filed for spousal financial access in your name." Helen blinked. Financial access? She submitted a form requesting authorization to manage your joint accounts as a legal spouse. If it had gone through the system unnoticed, she could have drained your retirement in weeks. Helen clutched her bag tighter. The betrayal had moved beyond the emotional. It had turned surgical, calculated. They started digging. Kelly's team traced Emily's IP addresses, social handles, and voice messages. It turned out Emily Rose was a pseudonym used by a woman named Ava Green, 32, from Portland. Not Oregon, but a tiny town in Texas. She had a history of short-term relationships with older women, most ending in restraining orders. "She's a con artist," Kelly confirmed. "But this is the first time she's targeted a family like this, simultaneously going after a son and a mother." Helen's stomach twisted. "Why us?" "Because you were vulnerable, widowed, financially stable, emotionally open." Helen returned to Colorado with a new resolve. She wasn't just a broken mother anymore. She was a woman about to expose a predator. She began recording everything. She bought a voice recorder on Amazon and tucked it into the living room bookshelf. She printed out every email, every text. She even created a decoy online profile, pretending to be a new target to see if Ava would take the bait. And she did. Within days, Ava messaged the fake account. Same charm, Same poetic language, same line. I believe souls are meant to find each other, even if they've been hurt before. Helen now had a pattern. She passed everything to Kelly, who began preparing a civil lawsuit for fraud, emotional damage, and financial endangerment. But it wasn't just legal prep Helen had to endure. Mike refused to talk to her. Neighbors whispered. A local blogger caught wind of the wedding fiasco and published a post titled, "Mother Marries Son's Ex, Real or Rumor." Helen's inbox filled with messages, some sympathetic, others cruel. One woman wrote, "You're disgusting, stay away from your own son." But Helen pressed on. "This isn't just about what she did to me," she told Susan. "It's what she could do to the next person." Still, Helen couldn't shake one growing fear. Ava knew. Her car tires were slashed one morning. A voice message came in from a blocked number. "You should have just kept pretending. You were better at it than you think." Helen froze. Ava was watching her. "Karma doesn't rush," Helen whispered to herself, voice steady as she gripped the recorder in her coat pocket. But it never misses. She met Kelly again the following week. "We're filing charges next month," Kelly said, "but you should know, she's filed a counterclaim. Says you coerced her into the marriage." Helen laughed in disbelief. "She's gaslighting the court now?" "She's manipulating the system," Kelly said. "But don't worry. We're going to show them the truth." As Helen walked out of the law office into the cold Chicago wind, she felt it for the first time. Not fear, but clarity. Because the storm was coming, and she was ready to stand in the eye of it. The courtroom at Cook County Justice Center was packed. A low buzz rippled through the gallery as Helen Morrison stepped in, dressed in black. Her shoulders were squared, her eyes unwavering. She wasn't here to relive humiliation. She was here for truth, for justice. At the front table sat Ava Green, a.k.a. Emily. She wore a cream-colored suit, her long hair pulled back in a polished braid. Her expression was calm, too calm. She whispered something to her lawyer and gave Helen a brief, mocking smile. Judge Reynolds entered. The bailiff called the session to order. "This court is now in session to hear Morrison v. Green, civil charges of fraud, emotional distress, and financial endangerment," the clerk read. Helen's lawyer, Kelly Thompson, opened with precision. She laid out the timeline. How Ava manipulated her way into Helen's life, used deception to marry her under false pretenses, then attempted to access her financial assets through a forged joint account request. And then came the recordings. Helen had gathered them quietly, her own voice, emails read aloud, and most damning of all, a voice memo captured from Ava's last message to the decoy account Helen had created. She was too easy. Lonely old women always are. All I had to do was call her special. And she opened the door. Gasps filled the courtroom. A reporter in the back scribbled furiously. But Ava didn't flinch. Instead, she stood, took the stand, and spun a new tale. "She was obsessed with me," Ava said, her voice soft, measured. "I tried to pull away, but she kept insisting. I went along with it because I didn't want to hurt her feelings." Her lawyer produced fabricated text messages that painted Helen as desperate. But Kelly was ready. "Your Honor, we've subpoenaed Ava's phone records. These messages were created using a spoofing app. We also have a witness prepared to testify on the defendant's history of manipulation." And then, the door opened, and Mike walked in. He looked thinner, older, guilt swimming in his eyes. "I want to speak," he said, surprising even the judge. On the stand, Mike's voice trembled. "I believed her. I was in love with her. But she played both of us. I found out she had another profile talking to 3 different women. She told me marrying my mom would be poetic revenge. I thought she was joking." Helen's lips parted, stunned. "You knew?" she whispered under her breath. She said it was performance art. She promised she wouldn't go through with it, Mike said, now crying. I thought I could stop it in time. But I didn't. I'm so sorry, Mom. The courtroom was silent. Then Kelly spoke. We rest our case. The judge took a moment, then delivered the ruling. Ava Green is found liable for fraud, emotional damage, and attempted financial coercion. The court orders a dissolution of the marriage. All financial requests are nullified. Damages awarded to the plaintiff, $480,000. Ava stood up abruptly. You think this is over? She hissed. I'll appeal. This is a circus. But the bailiff was already guiding her out. As Ava was escorted past Helen, she turned one last time. You weren't special. You were convenient. Helen didn't flinch. But just as Ava reached the exit, a second twist dropped. A woman in the gallery stood and raised her hand. Your Honor, may I submit new evidence? It was the decoy profile Helen had used, run by an intern from Kelly's office. They had arranged a video call with Ava 2 nights ago. Ava had fully confessed her plan, laughing, describing her methods, even naming previous victims. It was all on video. The courtroom watched in silence as Ava, on screen, said, They think it's love, but it's just chess. I always win. Judge Reynolds stared hard. I'm referring this to the district attorney for criminal investigation. Ms. Green, you may be facing felony charges. The room erupted. Helen closed her eyes. It was done. The web of lies had unraveled, publicly, legally, irrevocably. 3 months had passed since the courtroom verdict. Ava Green was now behind bars awaiting trial on multiple counts of fraud and identity theft. The video confession had gone viral after being leaked to a true crime podcast. Headlines flooded local and national media. Son's girlfriend marries his mother in elaborate scam. Wedding con ends in felony charges. Predator Ava Green's web of deceit exposed. Helen Morrison didn't hide. She didn't move. She didn't vanish. Instead, she stayed exactly where she was, walking through her neighborhood in Littleton, head held high. Some neighbors still whispered, others offered hugs. But Helen didn't need apologies. She had her truth. Mike moved back in temporarily. Their relationship was far from healed, but they were talking again, slowly, cautiously. Some nights they sat in silence watching old family videos. Other nights Mike would break down in tears. I should have protected you, he said one evening. Helen just shook her head. No, honey. We both needed to learn what manipulation really looks like. And it was true. Ava hadn't just exploited a lonely woman or a naive young man. She had revealed a frightening truth: how easily trust can be hijacked when grief, love, and technology collide. Helen began writing. Not fiction, but her own story. She shared it online, anonymously at first. The response was overwhelming. Thousands of women wrote to say they'd been duped, gaslit, led to believe lies in the name of love. She was no longer just a victim. She had become a voice. Eventually, a journalist asked if she would share her real name. Helen agreed. The interview ended with her looking straight into the camera and saying, Karma doesn't always knock first. Sometimes it storms in while you're wearing white and tears down every illusion you thought was love. But justice, it never forgets. And that line was replayed across millions of screens. In the end, Ava was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. The judge declared her a dangerous emotional manipulator and denied parole for the first 5 years. Several more victims came forward. Helen's lawsuit set a precedent for emotional fraud in symbolic marriages, a case now studied in legal ethics classes. Helen donated half of her settlement to organizations that help elder abuse victims and online scam survivors. She repainted her home, planted new flowers in the yard, got a cat named Karma because, as she told Susan, it always comes home. And on one quiet Sunday morning, Helen opened her email to find a message that simply read, "Your story saved me. I was about to meet someone like her. I backed out after reading your article. Thank you." She smiled softly. Because sometimes, justice isn't just about punishment. It's about preventing the next tragedy. It's about standing in your truth so others don't have to fall. And that's how karma struck, proving no one escapes justice. If you found this story powerful, hit like and subscribe to support our channel. Share this video so others know that justice always finds its way. Comment below if you've ever witnessed a story like this, or if you have one of your own.